Welcome to Climate Week NYC 2020 and to the Hub Live. I'm Mike Pearce, Corporate Partnerships Director of the Climate Group, and I'm delighted you can join us for this event at our first Climate Week to be held virtually. This is the 5th successive year we've hosted a Climate Week event on buildings, and our focus today is on smart buildings, how tech can enable productive, healthy and net zero buildings. In particular, we'd like to thank Signify and Train Technologies for their support for Climate Week NYC and this event. The topic remains a vital one in achieving our climate goals. Buildings account for 30 to 40% of total global emissions. And of course, in densely built up areas, that figure increases significantly, up to 70% in New York. But the current rates of renovation are still far too slow to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. And so our aim today is to motivate faster action, to share ideas, and to introduce you to some of the organisations that are taking a leadership position. We'll be hearing from a range of speakers, including technology providers, building occupiers, and finance organisations looking to incentivise investment in green buildings. We'll be exploring new smart technologies which can help businesses to decarbonize their building footprint. We'll also be showcasing real-world energy productivity best practices, such as smart LED lighting systems and heating and cooling technologies. And being 2020, we will of course also be looking at how tech can support our changing ways of work in the light of COVID-19. Before we start, we have a landmark to celebrate today. As many of you know, the Climate Group runs a series of corporate commitment campaigns, EP100, EV100 and RE100, that are designed to create demand signals. Signals that can shift markets in the energy, transport, manufacturing, industrial and building sectors in favour of clean technologies, as well as influencing the wider policy landscape in this direction. EP100 was launched in 2016 and brings together a growing group of energy smart companies committed to doing more with less energy by increasing their energy productivity. In our last annual report, we showed how just 21 of the member companies had saved over 730 terawatt hours. That's more than enough energy to power Germany for a year. And the financial case for members is equally compelling. One of our EP100 members, Hilton, has saved over $1 billion in cumulative utility costs by using their LightStay technology to manage and monitor energy, water and waste. Well, today, we can proudly announce that EP100 has reached 100 corporate joiners, a fantastic story of growing business action. We'll hear from 2 of our members today, and we'll be excited to report on the progress of this growing community in the run-up to COP next year. Our session today is going to be moderated by Bloomberg journalist Jess Shankelman. Thanks very much to Jess for her participation. And for the first session, she's going to be joined by the Mayor of New York City's Director of Sustainability, Mark Chambers. We look forward to hearing from Mark about the city's ambitious climate goals and strict energy codes for its buildings. Thank you once again for joining us, and have a great Climate Week.
When it comes to cutting pollution in New York City, you might think about smog from cars and vans, but the worst offenders are hiding in plain sight. Buildings account for 70% of the city's greenhouse gases through demand for heat and cooling and in the materials used for construction. While new buildings are built increasingly to stringent efficiency standards, old buildings and renovation rates on those are still far too slow to meet the Paris Agreement goals. And that's why in New York City, Mayor Bill de Blasio has brought in tough new laws that seek to slash their contribution to climate change. I'm Jessica Shankelman, a reporter with Bloomberg News, and I'm joined here today by Mark Chambers, who's the Director of Sustainability for the New York City Mayor's Office. Thanks for joining me, Mark. I wanted to start by just asking you, what is wrong with glass? Bill de Blasio said he wanted to ban new glass skyscrapers, and we've recently heard the President Donald Trump argue that new efficiency standards mean no windows at all in buildings.
Well, thanks for having me and having this conversation, Jess. I'll start off by saying that, glass as a material is something that has brought a lot to the built environment, but we haven't pushed it far enough. And we haven't been able to allow for the glass that we use in buildings to meet so many of the other technical requirements that we expect from performance of a lot of our other materials. So it's time for us to step our game up. So a lot of the tall glass skyscrapers are not using efficient enough glass, and that has to come to an end. And so we want materials that will perform the way we want our people to perform better. And so we are looking to make sure that buildings all across New York City are using materials that are actually improving the efficiency of those buildings, being able to incorporate better mass and glass ratios so that our buildings can actually, stay cooler and stay warmer when they need to without using so much energy. We really have to be able to get to the core of our building energy use, and that's one way in which we do it.
So the Climate Mobilization Act, that includes a raft of measures, including new labeling on buildings to explain how efficient they are, a bit like a nutrition label, and also, crucially, fines for building owners if they don't reduce their energy use. Can you just explain exactly what this local law is?
Absolutely. So in 2024, large buildings in New York City that are not in compliance, meaning that they have not done the work to reduce the emissions associated with operating their buildings, will face fines. But I want to be clear, we don't want to collect fines. We want the carbon. We want buildings to reduce their energy usage. And so we are set up to be able to help buildings succeed. The goal here is to have an impact on our greenhouse gas emissions, not to collect fines.
So since you introduced this law, we've had a pandemic, and I think that's really changed the way that people think about their buildings, the spaces that they inhabit. And of course, we just haven't been going into offices. So how has that changed the way that you think about this law?
Well, the law is based on an imperative. We have to reduce our impact on the changing world. And so I think that stays in place. We still have to look at the impact of our lifestyles and our society on climate change. So that clock is still ticking. But what we've seen in the pandemic around how we have to utilize spaces differently, I'm talking to you from my bedroom in my apartment in New York City, we are looking a lot more clearly and clear-eyed at how spaces can have multiple uses. And I think that's really going to inform much more efficiency with being able to have interdisciplinary uses of spaces that will give us a lot more flexibility going forward so our buildings can do more for us.
And you've been giving out, during this year, you've been giving out air conditioning units to people from low-income households. In the UK here, we have very low usage of air conditioning, so we kind of struggle to understand why you need so much, and how is that compatible with your climate change targets?
Well, you have to keep in mind, we're confronting multiple crises at the same time. We have both a crisis of a changing climate and a crisis of inequality. And when that really plays itself out together, it comes in a form, and particularly this summer, of extreme heat. And where you have vulnerable populations that can't go to cooling centers or can't go to rec centers or libraries and congregate, they're in their apartments. And then oftentimes those places can be extremely hot, and you have to keep in mind that urban heat is something that kills more Americans than a lot of the natural disasters that we're also facing. So being able to confront that and confront needs urgently was what the summer's Get Cool NYC program was all about, handing out air conditioners and making sure we can keep seniors safe and making sure that we are protecting them as we fight these multiple challenges simultaneously.
What about the cost of this? I think you've estimated it would cost $4 billion. Is that right? To retrofit the large buildings that fall under the local law. How is that going to be paid for? And also, with the pandemic, does it change the math? Does it make it harder for people to pay for it if people are opting out of leases?
Well, you have to keep in mind, so we estimated $4 billion as the kind of minimum threshold for some of the compliance, but this is something that is an economic driver. So all of the work associated with this is going to put people back to work. And that's going to be part of the engine that gets us back on our feet. So we're really not just looking at this from a point of view of, can we get those retrofits done? It's a point of view of, can the retrofits be how we get out of this, and how we are really going to tackle, the challenge of making sure our buildings are working for us, while simultaneously making sure that we are putting people back to work and making sure that we are, moving past the pandemic once, we feel like everyone is safe to do so.
Great. And how is it being financed? I think you've got a loan program where the loans are attached to the energy bills on the building. We had a similar program here in the UK that didn't do too well. So what's going to make sure this one succeeds?
Well, part of one of the benefits of the way which we've thought about this is to be as flexible as possible and meet building owners where they are. So some building owners will need to invest significant in systems and infrastructure of their buildings. Others will just need to invest in operations, or turning things off when they're not using them. So there's a myriad of different ways people are going to be tackling this. For us, it was important to set up a financing program that allows for people to take out low interest, long-term loans so that they can pay them back over the timeline of the different intervention they're going to do in their building. But simultaneously, we're also launching a large accelerator program, which will provide free technical assistance to building owners. And that will also provide a way for building owners that may not have the time or money to be able to initially wrap their brains around what their building should do from a performance standpoint. They can get the free technical assistance to be able to guide them on their way. So part of this is creating a culture of retrofit, as well as making sure that we are providing as many resources as possible to help people get this done.
And does it penalize businesses that are large energy users? Say if you have a data center or you're in media, and, does that mean that it's going to be harder for you to rent a building because the owner is going to worry about you pushing up their energy use?
Well, you have to keep in mind, this is something that is playing out over the entire city. So everyone's playing by the same rule book. Given that, there are also particular thresholds for different building typologies. So different buildings and building uses have different thresholds to meet, so that it's not one size fits all. It's something that is based on the building typology. That does allow for there to be somewhat of an equation or an equity around different building types. So we are hopeful that won't impact the ability for people to want to not do their business in New York City. And let's be honest, everyone wants to be in New York City, and that's not going to change.
One thing I was quite interested in, I was watching a TED talk you did. You were talking about the limits of technology for reducing energy efficiency. And I think you said reducing energy emissions from buildings isn't just about roof insulation or sealing up windows, but also changing the way we live. What do you mean by that? Does that mean we're all going to be having siestas instead of turning on the aircon?
I have to be honest, it's possible. I think that we have to really evaluate what things we are going to change that are going to impact, our decisions in the future. Because a lot of what we've been doing is not working. It's not consistent with having a sustainable planet for us to continue thriving on. And so there do have to be changes. But I also have to say, it's not just about individual choices and individual lifestyle changes. There are incredible systemic models that are being explored now. A perfect example is a donut model that's out of Oxford. It's being explored in Amsterdam. We can really think a little bit differently about what our motivations are and how that impacts a functioning and thriving economy where everyone has the ability to take part and everyone has the ability to thrive. That's really what I mean when I say that we have to change the way in which we live, because we need to do something in which everyone gets to fully participate and everyone gets to fully be a part of the future that we're creating.
What's the donut model you mentioned?
Well, the donut model is a new economic model. And again, I mentioned that they're beginning to test this out in Amsterdam. What it does is that it looks at some of the motivations around an economy and shifting them away from strictly around profit and moving them in a way in which it's looking at making sure there aren't people falling into the middle of that donut. And what that means is that oftentimes how we develop different industries and parts of our economy leave people out. And we know that the future that includes us being able to do what's necessary to save our planet has to galvanize everybody. We have to grow the tent. There needs to be everyone bending their skill sets, their lived experience, and their work towards a decarbonization of our country and our planet. If we're not able to bring everyone along, we're not going to be able to do this. So I think that looking at models that are much more inclusive and looking at models that that address some of social inequalities are going to be how we make our way forward.
So you passed this law last year. You're in the middle, probably still in the middle of a pandemic. Very much feels like that. What's next? What's next for you and tackling buildings emissions?
Well, it may not seem like a building emissions particular thing, but the next thing is for everyone to vote. That is the next thing that needs to happen here, not just in New York City, but in our country. We have to make sure that if we truly value a livable planet for the future, that we are making sure that we utilize the levers that we have to be able to make that voice heard. And I think that everyone needs to be able to take part in the kind of democratic process to make sure that we are making our voices heard. That's the biggest next thing that needs to happen.
Well, that's a very clear message. Thank you very much, Mark Chambers, Director of Sustainability at the New York City Mayor's Office.
Thanks, Jess.
Now we're going to hear from a number of companies who are working to reduce emissions in the built environment, and they're going to talk about what they're doing.
Hi, my name is Dave Rigney. I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer for Trane Technologies, a global climate innovator. Our company is known for bringing efficient and sustainable heating and cooling solutions to buildings, homes, and transportation around the world. At our company, sustainability is not just a nice thing to do. It's what we do every day. It's how we talk to our customers. It's how we engage our employees. Last year, we announced our 2030 sustainability commitments, which are leading us into the future. We have committed to carbon neutral operations and achieving a 10% absolute energy reduction. We also issued the Gigaton Challenge, pledging to reduce our customers' carbon emissions by 1 gigaton. That's equivalent to 2% of the world's annual emissions. We are especially focused on creating smart, healthy, and efficient buildings because heating and cooling buildings represents 15% of the world's carbon emissions. Indoor spaces are in the spotlight now more than ever as building managers work to ensure safe and healthy environments for their occupants. Buildings need to be comfortable and healthy. At Trane Technologies, we've been experts in managing indoor air quality for decades. In order to optimize the balance between comfort, healthy, and energy consumption, we depend on building intelligence and connectivity. In fact, we just passed a milestone of 20,000 connected buildings and 1 million pieces of connected equipment, and that number grows daily. We're at Climate Week because we believe one company can change an industry and one industry can change the world. If we work together, we can build positive momentum and drive exponential impacts for our people and our planet. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Condola, the CEO of Signify. Buildings are places where we can take an active part in the fight against climate change. Globally, they account for 39% of CO2 emissions. And in New York City, where building density is at its highest, that figure is around 70%. Building renovation is therefore a vital shortcut to achieving a carbon neutral world. Consider this. If we achieve an increase in 3% energy efficiency a year, driven by a similar 3% in renovation rates and 3% increase in the use of renewables per year, then a carbon neutral world by 2050 is in reach. Smart buildings show the way. For example, LED lighting when connected to software and sensors is up to 80% more energy efficient than conventional lighting. But there's also a huge value in the new services it can provide, like apps that use data from sensors in luminaires to tell you when a meeting room is free and even navigate you to it. You see, buildings are so much more than vehicles for saving energy. They are social hubs. They are where we work and we collaborate, where we educate, where we shop, where we dine and socialize. People aspire now to do this again, but in these challenging times, we need to make buildings safer places. During the pandemic, we added new features to our workspace app to help building managers make informed decisions on social distancing. For instance, the app, which is being piloted in the Milan office of a major energy company, can even guide office workers to less occupied areas within a building. And to further help people being protected, we are increasing by eightfold our capacity of UVC lighting, an amazing technology that can disinfect air, surfaces, and objects, inactivating viruses and bacteria. Tests that were lately done by Boston University reveal that in less than the time of an athlete takes to run 100 meters, our UVC lights can neutralize 99% of the virus that is causing COVID-19. UVC has a massive potential, both now and in the future. So we strongly urge that this proven, potentially life-saving technology is written into all future building codes. It is a technology to establish the new normal, a technology to support economic recovery and people's health and well-being. We are proud to be helping with this. Thank you.
I'm Makhegu Mabunda, and I'm the Sustainability Specialist at Woolworths Holdings, South Africa. At Woolworths, we refer to our sustainability strategy as the Good Business Journey. We are a largely private label food, fashion, beauty, and homeware retail chain that extends throughout Australia and Africa. Our vision is to become one of the most responsible retailers in the world, and we drive this by systematically embedding sustainability across the group through our Good Business Journey. Our South African operations contribute over 70% of our total energy consumption as a group. We have a large food store footprint in South Africa, and the bulk of this energy consumption is attributed to refrigeration. The biggest driver for energy efficiency in this space has therefore been the implementation of our own green building protocol, which includes installing innovations such as online metering, automated load controlling of electricity use, natural lighting, and CO2 refrigeration, to name a few. Recently, we successfully started rolling out closed-door refrigeration across our food stores, and it has now become a standard operating specification for all new stores. The system has evolved from heavy glass doors on refrigerators to lightweight acrylic doors, which are visually more aesthetic and easier to use for our customers. This initiative reduces refrigeration system energy consumption by about 40%, and for total energy consumption by about 25%. We have also focused our efforts in expanding LED lighting and solar PV across our African and Australian operations. We are a member of EP100, and combined, all of these technologies have enabled us to achieve our energy productivity target of having energy impact by 2020 from a 2005 baseline. We also have been able to quantify the monetary savings from these improvements, allowing us to further strengthen the business case for the implementation of eco-efficient technologies such as these. It is a continuous journey, and we aim to continuously show up in being part of the difference.
Hello to all you Climate Week NYC 2020 warriors. My name is Matt Luger, and I'm an operating partner at Generate Capital, and we're a proud partner of the great city of New York, working to install solar energy systems across all 5 boroughs and helping facilitate the transition to net zero smart buildings. A few years ago, the city announced an exciting and ambitious goal of installing 100 megawatts of solar electricity systems on city-owned buildings by 2025. The results of an extensive study of solar readiness of city-owned buildings showed that nearly 20 megawatts, or about 1/5 of that goal, could be installed on the first 88 rooftops, and more to come soon after. Following a competitive process, Generate Capital stepped in to partner with the team at the New York City Department of Citywide Administrative Services, or DCAS, and the New York City Department of Education to get the work done. Nearly all of the sites are part of the New York City public school system. However, a few museums and hospitals are also part of the program. Generate Capital will own and operate all of the solar systems, which will be hosted on the rooftops of the schools, museums, and hospitals. And the city will purchase the energy under a 20-year contract called a Power Purchase Agreement, or PPA. This PPA structure helps the city take advantage of lower cost solar electricity that we will operate and maintain for the entire term. These solar projects will be offsetting about 80 to 100% of the electricity used in most all of the buildings and provide clean electricity for 20 years and beyond. Additionally, a significant benefit is that these solar projects offer an exciting educational opportunity for New York City public schools as well. We've worked closely with the New York City Department of Education to support the development of curriculum for high school students. And in fact, in the summer of 2019, a group of students got up on the roof and even helped us build one of the solar projects, learning about the technology as well as careers in solar. We also provide the schools with live and historical data that come from the solar projects, and the Department of Education provides training for teachers who can then integrate the curriculum, the education about solar on the roofs into their curriculum. We're proud to stand with our partners at the City of New York to show other municipal entities and the entire world what can be accomplished with solar energy and other powerful sustainable technologies that benefit the local communities as well as the whole planet. Thanks and have a great event.
Now we're going to hear from each of our speakers. So over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Jess. Hi, my name is Dave Rigney. I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer for Trane Technology, a global climate innovator. Our brands include Trane and Thermo King, which are known for bringing efficient and sustainable heating and cooling solutions to buildings, homes, and transportation around the globe. At our company, sustainability is more than just a nice thing to do. It's what we do every day. It's the way we talk with our customers. It's the way we engage our employees. Today, 15% of the world's carbon emissions come from heating and cooling buildings. Some experts estimate that number could rise as high as 25% by 2030 if we don't change. We know that most buildings do not operate efficiently. Having conducted hundreds of thousands of energy audits, most buildings operate about 30% inefficiently, wasting energy, creating carbon emissions. However, smart buildings that are connected and continuously commissioned, almost always operate at their design state, not wasting energy. We often dispatch service technicians to buildings when a piece of equipment is not operating. With connected smart buildings, we dispatch technicians when a building or piece of equipment is using too much energy. At Trane Technologies, we just passed a milestone. We have over 20,000 connected buildings and over 1 million pieces of connected equipment. Today, more than ever, indoor space are in the spotlight as building managers work to ensure safe and healthy environments for their occupants. At Trane Technology, we've been helping our customers with indoor air quality for decades to ensure their buildings are safe and efficient. Many of the solutions to improve indoor air quality, which are backed by science, require additional energy, whether it's increasing the fresh air exchanges within the building or increasing the density of the filtration system. I've been asked the question several times recently. Can you have a building that is healthy and efficient, or do you need to make trade-offs? The answer is yes. At Trane Technology, our strategy is around creating healthy and efficient spaces. Most buildings operate inefficiently today, and we are experts at finding solutions to reduce energy waste. Smart buildings that are connected, buildings that learn every day how to become smarter tomorrow are key to improving the health and efficiency of the building, reducing energy waste, and helping us bend the curve on global warming. We're at Climate Week because we believe one company can change an industry and one industry can change the world. If we work together, we can build positive momentum and drive exponential impacts for our people and our planet. Jess, I'll turn it back to you, and I look forward to the panel discussion.
Thanks, Dave. Harry?
Yeah, so thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join this panel and to share a bit of our experience, but also our plans in the future for our sustainability program, with an eye on the world and on the people living on it. So if you look at last year, the mankind emitted like 33 gigatons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. That is about 11.5 kilograms or 25 pounds per person per day. So that's a mind-boggling number, and also actually quite depressing. So you can ask, what can you do about it? So for us, it starts with taking responsibility, setting a commitment, but then also putting that into practice by combining it with a program and with actions. So almost 5 years ago, at COP21 in Paris, we made a commitment to become carbon neutral by 2020. And it's actually a pleasure to share with you that earlier this month, 2 weeks ago, our CEO announced that we are now carbon neutral. So this was not easy. It was quite a big task, but we did it in the following way. So between 2011 and 2020, we reduced our energy consumption through efficiency measures by 70%. So throughout our global operations and manufacturing offices everywhere. We are now also powered for 100% by renewable electricity. We've changed our logistics to more sustainable modes. We've reduced business travel. And there where inevitably we had to do some compensation. We had our employees select projects where this mattered most, so like reforestation. So then you could say, like, does it stop there for us? Well, certainly it doesn't. So we look beyond carbon neutrality. And our next challenge is what we call doubling our positive impact on environment and society. And that comes in four building blocks. So first and foremost, actually the program is called Brightalize a Better World 2025. So again, a 5-year program. And first we'll double what we call the pace of the Paris Agreement as set out in the Paris Agreement. So business needs to take action to stay within the 1.5 degrees centigrade goal by 2031. And we will reach that goal by 2025, so 6 years early. And we do that for a large part by also reducing the impact throughout our whole value chain of suppliers and customers. Second, we will double our percentage of circular revenues to 32%. And this means that they're moving more and more to products that are modular, that are upgradable, recyclable, refurbishable, which is important also to allow a shift from invoicing products to moving towards leasing of lighting as a service. Then thirdly, we double our commitment to revenues from innovations that benefit society. And this is for the large part, so for products used in buildings. And there you see that buildings are also places that have an important social dimension. So not only their footprint, but also 90% of our lives we live in buildings. We become, you could say, the indoor generation. And this is where we work together, where we educate the next generation, where we dine, where we socialize, where we shop. And certainly these days we see that many people very much aspire to do that. So we do that through providing connected lighting, so that actually people's productivity and well-being is improved, lighting that adapts to circadian rhythm, so that actually our bio rhythm is, let's say, we work best in that environment compared to when we lived in nature. But it also means then further developing products like UVC for disinfection against COVID-19 and who knows what future virus. But then another important area is helping secure food availability. We see already that due to global warming, the world is struggling in food supply, and next to that, with the growth in global population. And you see that even fish, more than 50% of the fish that we eat is from fish farming. So there we also have important innovations in vertical farming, greenhouses, and as I mentioned, fish farming and animal rearing to contribute to the future of food security. And finally, but certainly not least, last but not least, we double the percentage of women in leadership roles, so to contribute to diversity and inclusion. So for others, I would say I call on governments and all that haven't done that yet to embrace a carbon neutral goal by 2050, with a crucial role for buildings, moving to net zero carbon buildings. And for companies, I think actually we should all do that at latest 2030. We see our experiences that it is worthy to embrace ambitious targets. They set your program in action, and you need a lot of time to take those actions. But it's also hugely engaging for employees and for customers, and then unlocks a tremendous amount of energy and innovation. So we look forward to jointly working with you and with others on such challenges in this decade of climate action, and certainly had to take the role of buildings as a first priority. So thank you.
Thank you, Harry. And Makhegu.
Thank you, Jess. So my name is Makhegu Mabunda, and I work as a sustainability specialist for Woolworths Holdings Limited, which is a retailer based in South Africa. We trade across 3 subsidiaries: Woolworths, which is headquartered in South Africa, as well as David Jones and Country Road, which are both headquartered in Australia. Our sustainability vision is to become one of the most responsible retailers in the world, and we drive this through embedding sustainability across the entire business, using or via our program or sustainability program, which we refer to as the Good Business Journey. We have 8 focus areas that underpin the Good Business Journey, namely people and transformation, social development, health and wellness, sustainable farming, ethical sourcing, as well as energy, water, and waste. Our vision for the built environment is largely premised on being able to transition to a low carbon economy. In 2017, we became the first major retailer to sign up to the EP100 initiative, and we're pleased to announce that we have achieved our target, reaching a 175% productivity from a 2005 baseline. The achievement was largely due to the fact that we continuously embed green building initiatives across the entire business by retrofitting old stores with new and efficient technology, as well as the continuous training of our staff, especially in the stores environment. As you might be aware, we operate in regions that are very prone to climate risk, and transitioning to a green economy for us is very imperative. It's basically it doesn't really give us a choice whether we want to or not. In order to sustain the business, we have to transition to a lower carbon economy. We need to pick each and every fruit that is available at our disposal to ensure the inclusion of everyone across the value chain in order to transition to this low carbon economy. What COVID-19 has done for us is that it's shaken what I want to refer to as a very stagnant regime, where we were very comfortable in how we're doing things, and now we are forced to actually start thinking of what is the new way forward. And I mean, some companies have not been in that space before, but now it's imperative that we start thinking about how do we transition, and how do we ensure that this transition is inclusive and it doesn't leave anyone behind. The key takeout for me in this space is that there is not a single technology or a pathway in order to transition. We need to employ multiple technologies and multiple pathways. And in this way, where we will ensure that everyone is included in this transition and ensure that everyone will have a voice across our value chain. Also, this will not only enable us to meet our climate goals, but to ensure that we continue to improve on the technologies that we want to see on the market, and also improving on how we retrofit some of our buildings. Lastly, being able to measure consumption for us is very critical as a retailer. It's okay to retrofit our buildings, but if we're not able to measure the consumption and also correlate that with savings, it doesn't really make much sense for us. So being able to measure is very important, so that we can be able to build the business case for further investment in the space. So I'm very grateful to be part of the panel, and I hope it will be a fruitful discussion going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Makhegu. I want to start actually by asking you about the pandemic. You mentioned that it's really shaken businesses up. How about Woolworths specifically? How has it made you rethink your green building protocol in terms of, if footfall's been down because of lockdowns? Has it made you rethink the way that you use buildings?
Well, currently everyone or most of the staff are working from home. So I would say we would be forced to start thinking about how buildings work going forward when everyone returns to office. And that is assuming that everyone will return to the office. I don't see that happening anytime soon. But if you look at the case of South Africa, for instance, where there's a lot of communities that are very dense, working from home for some people becomes an added burden. And technology in South Africa is not that advanced. So there's still a lot of people that don't have access to smart technology. There's people that don't access to basic service like the internet, for instance. So we'll need to start looking around that to make sure that everyone is included. And we need to be cognizant of the fact that the economic backgrounds of the people that are impacted by COVID are totally different. So yeah, but for now, at Woolworths, everyone is working from home where possible. Only essential staff comes to the office.
And what's the biggest barrier that Woolworths faces in energy productivity and improving efficiency in the built environment?
I would say for us, the biggest barrier is CapEx. Where the allocation of funds, basically, I mean, we are a retailer, and the main value proposition for us is to provide or to sell products. So having to motivate why there needs to be capex invested, for instance, for green building initiatives, can be quite challenging. Hence, in my introduction, I mentioned that savings for us, or being able to quantify the savings and use that as a motivator when we go out there and ask for that capex, is quite important. So the biggest thing is capex, and also being in South Africa. If you look at the exchange rate, most of the technologies that we have to employ come from overseas for us, and the exchange rate is not always in our favor. So we also need to look at that. Yeah.
And so how do you navigate that barrier? Obviously, you mentioned kind of making the business case for the savings that you'll generate, but for something like manufacturing, if you just don't have that capacity, how do you navigate it?
Can you rephrase the question?
Sure. But I'm wondering, how do you overcome this barrier? You mentioned that one of the ways of doing it is making the business case for the energy savings that you will make in the long run. But some of the barriers, like exchange rate and lack of manufacturing capacity, are harder to overcome.
So we manufacture. Well, we don't manufacture. We sell clothing and homeware as well as food. So over 95% of our food product actually comes from South Africa, where we work with our farmers very closely through a farming program called Farming for the Future to employ sustainable farming practices. The challenge comes where we have to source clothing and homeware product, which usually comes from outside of the country. But that is, yeah, the manufacturing industry in South Africa dwindled a few years ago, and currently the government is trying to bring it back. So I think going forward and moving into this low carbon economy, everyone is now seeing the value of bringing everything in house. When I say in house, I mean in South Africa, to ensure that we start sourcing locally and also empowering our local communities. But right now, majority of our products is sourced offshore.
Jess, if I could add in, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
we talk to customers all day long about how we can, improve the energy efficiency of their building. And as I said, most buildings we know don't operate efficiently. And around the globe, what we see skeptics for sure. Being able to measure the reduction is very important, and it has to be able to prove the business case. We find a lot of customers that want to find a silver bullet, and say, it's this one thing you can do to save me energy and help reduce carbon emissions. It's usually a system of things that have to happen. And being able to demonstrate to the customer the savings that they will get vis-a-vis those system of events that will take place is very important. What we've done at Train Technologies is we've actually guaranteed savings. We have programs where we'll actually guarantee the energy savings, and we help our customer actually with the financing, and they pay for the financing with the savings that they achieve. So they basically, think of a school district would actually create a bond. The savings they would get from their energy bill, they would actually pay off the bond, and we would guarantee that. So there are innovative ways to really get customers around the globe through how we all need to take action if we want to make sure that by 2030 we don't continue to on the pace that we're at.
I think
And
maybe
just
adding there.
yeah, so just to also add on that, so what we do also, we have a code of business principles, which also, before we onboard suppliers, whether offshore or within the border of South Africa, there's certain prescripts that they need to adhere to, or we will encourage them to be more environmentally friendly. So, and those suppliers that are eager to work with us, we really appreciate, and we take them through the journey with us. So, like I mentioned, it's easier to work with the farmers because they are based in South Africa, whereas offshore it's quite difficult. But we do have those programs, and we've been working on our science-based target, and part of the target is to also start working with our suppliers, especially offshore, to ensure that we start employing those green practices.
Maybe can I
And
add a few
Harry,
things to that?
please do.
Yeah, I think first then it starts with having a goal, like a carbon neutral goal entirely. But then for buildings, it should be net zero carbon buildings. We were the first signatory 2 years ago of this program of the World Green Building Council. But then linked to that, there's also already for quite some time a debate on the need to adopt a 3% renovation rate per year. So if you renovate buildings at 3% per year, which is a little bit more than double the rate of today, then you don't have to be a mathematician to see like, hey, 30 years to go, 3% per year combined with shifting the remaining energy consumption to renewables so that the buildings can become carbon neutral. And for that, then also building on some of the previous remarks, you need to see what is the toolbox. So what are the enablers? Because more and more we are in the room with people who want to do it, but they don't exactly know how. And that means that you need to look at what we call circular procurement. So you look at the whole life cycle, so that indeed through business models you can bring the economic benefits over lifetime, you can bring them forwards and take away the budget hurdle, so either for a new building or for a renovation. And that is where you need new business models. So we implemented lighting as a service, so nicely fits then with also what Train is doing. And their customers, in essence, they can adopt a lighting upgrade to connected LED lighting for free, because they don't have additional expenditure. They could even choose for having lower monthly cost. But then at the same time, they save 70% on energy, on footprint, and have lighting that improves productivity and well-being in a building. Because lighting is not just, let's say, what people would think like as one type of lighting, but then let's say how you moderate, how you look at different tones of white, has a big impact on how people feel, how productive they are, on learning effectiveness. We've done tries on schools where kids they read 50% faster, make less spelling mistakes. So all these things can come together. Once we say, okay, the target is carbon neutral, 3% renovation per year, and then use those smarter business models to use the lifetime economics that we all know are there.
Harry, I want to ask you, for as long as I've been covering the environment as a journalist, which is 10 years, energy efficiency has had a huge reputation problem, despite the clear business case for it. It's just seen as quite boring. I mean, you're not going to get a Tesla out of it, are you? Do you think that connected lighting goes some way to try and make it a little bit more interesting? And what other kind of innovations do you see in this area that could make energy efficiency cool?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's indeed a good point, because then I think for part then people feel energy efficiency is invisible. You can't see it, and you can see a Tesla. That's already a starter. But then if you translate, energy efficiency means more building renovation. So that is also, certainly these days, putting people back to work. And if you then do those projects, be it with lighting, be it with HVAC, if you then start talking about the benefits, and people say like, hey, my house is much more nice because I can talk to my lighting, it changes to romantic, or in a school having kids are happy and a teacher doesn't get exhausted by jumpy kids. I think those are the things that you should be talking about. We did a project years ago on lighting in schools. You could say like energy efficiency in schools or green schools. No, we called it brighter schools. And then without reading big reports, the parents understood, yeah, hey, brighter schools, yeah, that's where we want our kids to go to. So I think also there, it's for part in the stories that we tell and that we share, and that we make it cool by the examples and not per se talking about energy efficiency. That's the means to a goal. And what is really cool, coming then to the cool part of your remark, is that lighting has become digital. So it's the backbone of the IoT, because the whole electricity network in streets and in buildings is based on lighting. It was the first product people used. And then you can also, on the lighting, we've launched 2 years ago, an internet platform called Interact. You could call it the Android of lighting. So then all the light points get connected. That makes actually then advancing energy efficiency easier, because you can put it in a big project, make it financeable. But it also means that cities and building owners, they can develop apps. And we see cities now that use the light points and the sensors in there to monitor let's say traffic flow, to identify traffic accidents, air pollution, and in buildings indeed to interact with people being present. With COVID now, to help them, let's say, preventing hotspots in an office. So those are all, I would say, really cool things, and that's what we hear back from our customers.
And I was going to ask, how have you seen, what's changed in what your customers are asking for this year because of the pandemic?
You asked me?
How are your customers changing what they're demanding from you because of the pandemic?
So for part, you see really a trend towards these solutions. And also now we're getting a bit more used to working from home. But again, this is the new normal, is that we find a new balance between working from home and working from our workspace. As I mentioned, we are a social species. This looks like efficient. We don't have the commuting time, which can be quite terrible in some cities. But then in order to become effective, we need to look each other in the eye. We need to be together. And in different things that we do in buildings. So that's what our customers are asking there, is how can lighting contribute to creating a new normal, like a safe place in buildings for people to re-engage. Actually to speed up a little bit getting to that new normal. And that is where we see what I mentioned, how the connected lighting can help identify hotspots. So help us then, in the way we walk and traffic through buildings, that we use our buildings. And the ultraviolet UVC can clean the air. It can also, when people are not around, clean the desk surface. Within seconds, we've now have a report from Boston University that within seconds, the COVID virus is inactivated by destroying its RNA and DNA. So those are things that our customers are asking, and where we see that we can contribute, like others can contribute other things to getting back to those places where we want to be. Let's say in the social dimension of what we are.
It's interesting because often, I was just going to say, often environmental technologies do particularly well when they're attached to another benefit as well. So as you mentioned, the UVC lighting is able to have an impact. I think for many of us outside of the US, we associate those comments with President Trump, where he talked about the benefits of ultraviolet light. Is that the same thing that you're talking about?
So there are different forms of ultraviolet. We know UVA and UVB from solar, and actually every UVB needs to be a bit cautious for not getting a sunburn or worse. UVC is filtered by the atmosphere, so it doesn't reach us. So it's very beneficial in disinfection. We think it can be combined with let's say, with detergent disinfection, so that you have the whole package. But people should not be present, because it could even do a bit worse than sunburn. It is also not good for your eyes. But then again, when the lighting is intelligent, it can then be programmed to disinfect when people are not around. It will notice when people are around, so it won't work. And that actually then, let's say, the new nature, the digital nature of those new technologies then helping to accelerate people people's ability to adopt these new benefits.
Yeah, Jess, if I could just add in there, what we're seeing from our customers certainly is it started out with COVID to be remote services. So customers wanted to be connected. So as you become connected to a building and you start to run your intelligence against how that building is operating versus how it should be operating, we were able to actually improve the energy efficiency. So energy efficiency became cool just because we were social distancing and we now had the data. So that we've certainly seen a big increase there. The other thing that we've obviously seen a very large increase in is the attention to the indoor air quality. And Harry talked a little bit about it with UVC lighting. We have solutions that integrate some of those UVC lightings within the air handling system. And again, it's a system of things that you need to do to a building to make it efficient and safe. And it's not a silver bullet that you can go out and implement. We had a customer call the other day and said, I can't get airflow through my building. And we went out and did an inspection, and we realized that the customer had upgraded all of their filters and they increased the density. Well, that's fine, but the system wasn't equipped to handle that density. And actually, by going to a MERV 13 filter, they actually had a reverse effect because they had no airflow through the building. So we're getting a lot of attention to indoor air quality. Everyone's concerned about coming back to the office. As far as how many people will come back to the office, I think we'll learn that over time. But UVC lighting is a big part of our solutions as well as to how we can not only increase the amount of air coming in, but as that air comes in, make sure it's safe for the indoor environment.
And Dave, I want to ask you how various stakeholders like financiers, policymakers, and end users work together to ensure the adoption and scale up of these kind of technologies. Are there some models of collaboration that have been successful?
There are some models that have been successful. I would tell you that my first response to your answer is they don't work well together. Again, people are, if you're running a business, you're concerned about the payback. We've created solutions where we've tied the payback in with a financier so they can understand how they're going to get paid based on the savings that will be derived. You do have some states and local governments that are putting regulation out there that usually helps, but it's very sporadic, and I would not say it's universal across, certainly not across the globe. And then within countries, it's somewhat sporadic.
And you mentioned the need for a 3% renovation target. Where would that come from? Would that be something that's agreed on a global level or by cities or countries or companies even?
That's really important, and that's where we work together with a lot of other companies. Some years ago, we founded what is now called, with a bit of a long title, the Global Energy Efficiency Accelerator Platform. It runs under the UN, but there this goal is present. A bit more recently, the 3% Club, where even our CEO spoke in the General Assembly last year, September, so when Climate Week was still face-to-face event. But so this needs to be done by the public sector. So even in the definition of the European Green Deal, we had very constructive engagement with European leaders, and we said, but then you should also walk the talk and include 3% renovation rates and net zero carbon ministerial buildings and public sector buildings in those programs, which they've done now, because that will also show, it will demystify climate action. It will show these are the jobs. It will show the benefits that we spoke about, more anecdotal, and people will start feeling more comfortable, but also jumping on the bandwagon and accelerating the action, which needs to double, we know that. But also companies, more and more companies have made carbon neutral commitments, footprint commitments, and that is where we then reach out in the same way as they reach out to us on other elements. And let's do this together. We are more and more in the room with people who agree that we need to do this. I think we see that around us. So then it's about now looking at what are the enablers. I mentioned one, which is procurement. So if you just define procurement, not to look at the initial price tag of a product, but at the whole life cycle impact, then any new innovation, any new technology is cheaper over lifetime and having all these benefits. But there is also something like accounting rules and energy performance contracting. There are some developments there to allow that to be used off balance sheet. And many cities are struggling with their debt level. So also in Europe. And if you then would say like, hey, the energy bill is a monthly operation expenditure, well, why not having a reduction of your energy bill also being a monthly expenditure? But then if you do that through a service contract, yeah, it really becomes a no-brainer, and it's then creating the future for free. And maybe one last point there, what we learned from a research some time ago, is that, because often people could say, yeah, it's not possible, there are people in the building and in the home and in the private sector in those buildings. But then if you look, there was a study that showed that if you would utilize the moment of tenancy or ownership change for public, private sector and residential buildings to motivate and also to regulate such deeper renovation, that is in itself enough to double those renovation rates to 3% per year. So we would say, like, to our political leaders, we are behind this. We see the human benefits. We see the benefits for the world. We capture that in our Brighter Nice Better World program. We have to do it. It's the only future that is viable and attractive and inclusive. So let us help you do it. There's no reason to delay, and it's cheaper in the end as compared to further delay.
And do you think COVID provides an opportunity for that?
I think COVID provides us an opportunity. It actually shows us what a pandemic can do. And you could say that, let's say, the climate pandemic would be even far worse. This one, it just seems about manageable. It's already making things, tilting things out of balance, but it still seems manageable. But the climate change would be really disruptive. So we shouldn't let that happen. I think what we also learned from COVID is that, where maybe at times we can be a bit depressed or concerned, it also shows that over a majority, people are able and willing for solidarity measures and to work together, as we are speaking today and this entire week. So there's a lot of reason for hope, because in the end, I think there's more good in people than anything else. And we want to work together to make this better future happen. I think certainly for us, for the logic, for the economics, but also for the next generation.
Great, thank you. Well, I want to thank all my panelists for a fascinating conversation that's left me feeling very optimistic about the built environment, that there will be more energy efficiency in it, and it can work together to meet the Paris goals. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Makhegu. Thank you, Jess.
Thanks, everyone.
Nice to meet you. Take care.
Likewise.
Thanks to all our panelists for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Climate Week 2020.